Okay, so continuing with the uncanny, doubles, etc. Let's begin with thinking about the uncanny valley. Whoa, we don't want that one. Where is our PowerPoint? There we go. Okay, so here we are. So what is the uncanny valley? The uncanny valley is, first of all, it's as it says here, a term coined in 1970, again by a Japanese chap named Masahiro Mori. And the uncanny valley, quite simply, is the point at which we, that is humans, who are looking at or engaging with a robot or an automaton or artificial intelligence or a double of some kind of uncanny thing which in some way replicates the human. It's the point at which suddenly we have really uncanny, very odd, very abject, very disgusted feelings about that automaton. So suddenly it's the point at which our capacity for empathy or our sort of our capacity to like that robot or to identify with it drops off. So the two axes in this chart you'll see here, one is the familiarity axis going on your left, and the one on the bottom, which is here, is human likeness. So familiarity and likeness, we move as we move. Now, okay, let's just look at this. So as we move upwards in familiarity and as we move towards greater human likeness, our empathy increases, okay? We feel connection to it, we identify with it, we are concerned for its well-being, whatever you want to say. So it begins low with the industrial robot which doesn't resemble the human hardly at all. An industrial robot that's making car parts or something. So it's, our feelings toward it are low. What else? But as it becomes more familiar, and as you can see, it's heading towards the humanoid robots that look like humans. We get really connected to that robot. But then all of a sudden something happens and it drops off. And what makes it drop off will be slightly different for everyone and is debatable. But according to this chart, it's the zombie is very, very low. It looks a lot like a human. But there's something horrifying about it. It's something we feel disgusted. It's abject. And oddly, you can see the prosthetic hand is there, etc., etc. And then we come back up out of the uncanny valley when we get up to like a healthy person. So there's lots of writing and thinking about this. And obviously this is 1970, and so it's moved on a bit and people have written and revised this, but it's not so much what Maury's got there. Like, he's got the Banraku puppets, which most of you will not be familiar with. That'll be different. It's obviously culturally relevant for the Japanese, but he does raise really important questions about why, my numbers didn't work out there. I moved them around and took one out, and the 4 and 5 did not change to 3 and 4. But anyways, the uncanny valley, it asks the question, why are we so disturbed? What is it about our psyches that reacts so negatively towards certain kinds of replicas or replicants of the human. So there's a fear of being replaced by a machine or taken over by a machine. Humans suddenly realize they're no longer exceptional, or that they realize they're kidding themselves to think that they were exceptional and that they're not, and that they are not at the top of this kind of food chain or the chain of being. And also these machines violate human norms and categories. A robot or something stuck in the Uncanny Valley is no longer seen as a robot performing well as a human being, but as a human being failing at being a normal person. So we get if you think back to the last example from the first lecture, we want them to fit into our norms, our values, to reflect those, honesty, whatever it might be, love, etc., etc., to be decent. There's a really interesting clip which I should show you about. In fact, I will include it in one of the lectures because it's so good. But anyways, it's a film clip of an American robot designer, and he talks about how important it is the robots sort of reflect political views of democracy and equality and all this sort of stuff. And so there are all kinds of questions around them reflecting human ideals and human norms and beliefs. Okay, so there's also a kind of visceral discussion. This is interesting in light of COVID. That can be triggered by certain types of robots or automata, and that is that they are seen to contaminate the human, that they carry something which will change the human biology, that will change human bodies, human life. And then there's also this big one about identity and individualism. Humans are taught and they hold dear this idea that we're all unique, and we have we're each of us is a unique person, we're special, and if we can be copied, and if we can also have something which is not just a copy physically, but that it also carries our virtues and vices and character, then that really does threaten our idea of a unique personhood. Okay, so one of the things that is slightly different here I want to go back a little bit to Freud and the uncanny. And Freud talks a lot about the significance of the eyes. And I think this is important for us because we're doing, this is about realism, and we've really spent a lot of time thinking about vision and visuality. So there's a fear of losing the eyes. There's a castration complex that has to do with the uncanny. And this is really, again, very strongly in the Sandman, which is all about, it's full of sight and eyes and eyeglasses and making of false eyes and fear of losing the eyes. So without knowing everything about the Oedipus theory and all that sort of stuff, the castration complex, the thing to know really is the emotion, the feeling of impotence, of a lack of ability to create your world, a lack of ability to do, the fear of being vulnerable. So there's a social meaning, you could say. It's and I should say, so why is the eyes connected to the castration complex? Because obviously in Freud's world, the phallus is the biological marker of strength, of certain traditional ideas of masculinity, of potency, of great strength and ability, of being in charge of one's own destiny and all that sort of stuff. And so too are the eyes all connected to that. If you think about how if you are a sighted person and the next day you are completely blind, how suddenly dependent you would be, how vulnerable you would feel. So that's why those things are connected. So there's a kind of social meaning, we could say, to the idea of castration or losing the eyes. There's a fear that we would be unable to inspire or stir people to do things, to communicate, that there's an inability to be creative, that there's a fear of impotence, that other people witness, and other people are more powerful than us. They have more, they're smarter, they're faster, they're better, they have more things. And there's also this feeling of inability to protect others, inability to control one's actions, fear of commitment. There's a whole thing about domesticity here, obviously, because this is all related to the canny, the Heimlich, the familiar. So all these things come together in Freud's idea of the uncanny, but also how he relates it to eyes and how strongly motivating in a negative way human impotence is. And the double, to mix it all up together, the double can be an effect of these feelings of impotency or castration. In early life, so there's a theory, Freudian theory, that in early life we have several selves, but we become molded into this idea of one self with, our going back to what we were just talking about, one unique personhood, one self with our essential kind of characteristics. So you can have this automata or a double, and automata can remind us of how we used to have multiple selves, and that there was great possibility, and this automata can be a manifestation of this great disappointment that we have been molded, and that this potential we had is gone. Freud emphasizes that one can find in the double the strivings of the ego that were frustrated by adverse circumstances, all the suppressed acts of volition that fostered the illusion of free will. So this is very related. Again, about disappointment, again, about impotency. Our ego can become so damaged because we suddenly, realize that our life has been all about suppression, repression, and that we believed we had this kind of free will in which we were going to go out and conquer the world, and we didn't, we don't, we can't. Okay, and if you do read The Sandman, I would encourage you to think about the character Nathaniel and his relation to the female gaze, and why it's so powerfully frightening for him, and why he loves an automaton whose gaze is obviously lifeless, whose eyes only reflect his own look. So what is it about his relationship with the automaton, etc.? Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, and in the next one we are going to look at simulacra and simulation. Da 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 da.